I'm Chris Bussing. Welcome to my channel. It's committed to helping more people sell more and live more full lives. We've got an amazing guest today, Dale Dupree, who's going to teach us how to rebel against average sales results and create a sales legacy. And this guy has cold prospecting tactics and strategies that are so outrageous, they'll blow your ass straight off your body. We're going to dig into that. And that's an inside joke between Dale and I saw a post that he made, and we'll talk more about that. Dale, thanks for joining. How you doing today?
It's great to be here, bro. I'm doing fantastic. It's a beautiful, lovely, fantastic Wednesday evening right here in East Tennessee. I got my best friend hanging out with me, playing dinosaurs on the phone, here hanging out with you. It's an honor to be here, bro. Thanks for having me.
Well, happy hump day. I couldn't think of a better opportunity to push us over the edge with a little inspiration when it comes to sales and life. Now, guys, thank you for those who have joined live and to those who show up as this floats out into the evergreen YouTube sea collecting views. Make sure to give the like button a love tap because the YouTube algorithm loves that too. And we'll show this video to more people who could benefit from the message, and share if you feel inclined, if you get a lot out of this. So guys, let's start with story time. Dale, you've got so many amazing stories of creative examples of cold outreach. Can you tell us a little bit about the crumpled sales letters?
Oh, yeah, that's an easy one. There's probably a few people that could be tuning in right now too that probably use those, but the origins, the arc of the crumpled letter starts in 2009. I actually was reading an article about the real estate market and was trying to kind of figure out business still to some extent. Although I was getting better at sales, I still was just like lacking in some areas around my just general abilities. One of them being attention getting ultimately. And what I was noticing is that there was this massive collapse right in 2007, 2008 around the real estate market. And I was wondering to myself, like, how is a realtor selling anything now? That was kind of my thought process. I started doing this research on real estate, and I found this guy. And what's crazy is the story went back to 2004. And so it starts with like things are booming, everyone's crushing everything. And his story though in 2004 that everything sucked, which was kind of a crazy thought, right? So I'm getting sucked into this story, right? And eventually I got this guy on the phone and asked him a little bit about his journey and the things that he did in order to get better and to create the successes that he did. And so he told me, he connected with me first, which I thought was awesome of him. I mean, I'm just a nobody out of North Florida. He's down in South Florida. I mean, maybe, Central Florida, right? Like maybe there was that Floridian vibe going on. But he basically told me a little bit more about this identity of how he got people's attention. And basically what he did is he was sending out these mailers that were getting a really low return. And at the time, direct mail was crushing. So everybody was using it. And he's like, here he is like, why is mine not getting read? Well, the real estate market was so saturated at that point that he was getting lost in the fray. So what he was doing was sending these letters to people that their houses had been on the market for 90 to 120 days and basically trying to get them to relist their home with his firm. And so what he did is he actually went to the print shop like mad as hell that he got a 0.03% return rate, I think was the number, if I recall correctly. It was so low, dude. It was insane. And he just spent like literally $50,000 on this campaign, something ridiculous. He goes down to the printer, has him reprint the whole thing, and he basically in the print shop floor, he writes on each letter, "Don't throw me away again," and he smashes them. He sends all those same letters out, but by hand he did this, just like out of anger was kind of the story. And I think there's an article online that you can read too, if I recall correctly. But basically, like when he did that, he got a 20% response. He made millions, and all of a sudden he wasn't like in the rat race anymore. He was like standing above everybody else and actually like doing something that was getting attention. And I thought to myself, that's genius. And then I started to say, well, what's the one thing that will help me to get people's attention more effectively? And that's creating familiar moments and causing curiosity. We as humans share those unique characteristics. All of us do. Just like we can all be angry, we can all be sad, we can all be afraid of something. We also are all naturally, as humans, we're curious, and we operate in assumptions. So when we find something to be familiar, we say like, I know this to some capacity, and we feel safer around it. So what I said is that, what if I could just tell these people how I know they feel? And so my crumpled letter was born, which was this idea of, if I tell the prospect, hey, I pre-crumpled this to make it easier for you to throw away, because 90% of the sales and marketing you get is trash and you get rid of it anyway, then maybe I'd get some more attention. That escalated and evolved into the coffee stain letter, the pre-burnt letter, the travel around the world letter, a whole bunch of different things that we have now, the paper airplane, the pre-shredded letter, just like a lot when it comes to the actual cadence itself. But what I think people really need to hear is that I didn't create something thinking, oh, I'll get a 20% return on this, retire, buy my mansion, get my yacht, and whatever else people think. I said to myself, this is a good idea. We'll see if it works, but I need to also think that nothing is a silver bullet. And so, what do I do when they don't respond to this crumbled letter? And thus, the what we call now the rebel letter campaign was born, but of the origins of the copier warrior, which is where I come from. And so I was using these sequenced letters and setting appointments with some of the largest organizations you've ever heard of, or anybody in your direct circles has ever heard of, like some of the biggest defense manufacturing firms on the Space Coast in Florida. And it was wild what was happening. It was just simply because I differentiated myself enough to not look like the noise of salespeople, that I spoke to a familiar moment for these people individually, and that I helped myself to kind of like get into their shoes in the process. So instead of it being like a buyer seller dance, which I think is total garbage, it was more of like a human to human interaction, and then feeling that emotion that I'm putting out, which is like, hey, look, this sucks. Okay. Like, let's be honest, this sucks. Like, why can't we just like admit that? What's so hard about that? So here's my letter admitting that, and then also bullet pointing and giving them a very unique experience around the things I can fix for them. And because there was humor tied in, and ultimately this identity of what the gurus call value, I hate that word, by the way.
Really?
I was able to really break into a lot of these private groups and circles of people that no one could ever get into.
Why do you hate the word value?
I don't think anybody knows how to describe it.
If you had to take a stab at it, how would you describe it, or what would you
I
call
know.
it?
I know how to explain it. I know how to express it. Like, to me, like, value is excellence. So if I can provide excellence through my actions and my abilities to you, then what happens is that the outcome of the things that I give to you are literally like plated in gold, is the thought process here. They're exactly the things that you desire from like a white glove perspective, like that service first oriented mindset. And ultimately, it's also about stewardship. You can't have value without excellence and stewardship. If I'm not being a good steward of your time, of this interaction, of what we do together through business, then what's the point in the first place? And the problem is people say, you got to provide value to your prospects if they want to buy, if you want them to buy from you. It's like, well, no, like, that's, yeah, sure. Like, value is a great word to use, but like, give me the specifics. Like, what does excellence equal? What does stewardship equal? And ultimately, like, what's the playbook of value? Because those same people that say that then say, things like, well, just keep sending them emails and check in and see how if they're feeling any certain way about your proposal. Like, what value is in that? There's none. Right. So I think if we identify around words that have more of an action oriented with them and are more of a verb than just this description that lacks a description, that sellers hear that differently, and that we're doing the sales world a favor instead of just like walking around saying, yeah, provide value to this person. Like, it's always an empty word in the way that people put it out there and point it out as something that's important inside of the sales cycle. Like, tell me what that means, right? Like, that's what I want to know from people. Like, just tell me what that means.
If you ask me, I'd say watch the first 9 minutes and 17 seconds of my interview with Dale Dupree. This is value in action right here, baby. Let's go. And I'm also a Florida man, by the way. I'm from Naples, Florida. And they say the folks from Florida are a little eccentric. And also love rock, by the way. Huge rock fan. And weren't you a rock star at one point? I'm curious, like, did that shape your creativity? Like, what did you take away from being a musician that you actually have leveraged in the sales world?
Yeah, I played in a band started on Warner Brothers, or on Pluto Records, and ended up on Warner Music Group.
Wow.
And it was a heavy metal band. And as my son would say, monster singers is what he calls them right now, or dinosaur music.
That's
is
my
how he
favorite type of
labels it.
music. So, yeah,
So
yeah.
apparently dinosaurs attack anytime it comes on, which is great. I mean, I love dinosaurs, so I dig his perspective. But anyway, so I played in a heavy metal band. It was a Christian band where I was, really in this realm at the time of wanting to be out there professing my purpose, my why, the things that drove me, my mission through my music, and ultimately be able to connect with people differently because of that. Not to force myself into people's ecosystems, but to be a connector around these things that people could find common goals in. It is definitely like part of the origins of like how I even created the Sales Rebellion, which is that I'm sitting around thinking of like, well, what's the name of this company? And I'm sitting there and I'm like, I need it to describe me and my purpose. I needed to describe what I desire to achieve inside of my sales career and what somebody else could attach themselves to as well. Because there's like, to me, like a company is an empty shell without people, without morals and ethics, without culture, without something that drives us ultimately as well too. And something that we're working toward from a long-term perspective, like if we just say we sell this product, these people buy it, and these are our competitors. Now, that's not very exciting to me, because when I played in my band, it was like there's 3 bands after you, you're the first. There's 500 people here, and none of them came to see you. And they came to see the top band, and maybe the one that comes right before them. But the guys that are playing after you and you, I don't think anybody even knows who you are. Those were great moments for me because it allowed me to say like, well, nobody cares as much as you. So if you really care that much, like show me how much you care has always been the thought process. And so I did. Every night I did. I showed up creatively, uniquely. We had the best reputation for being like one of the most obnoxious, wild and crazy metal bands there was at the time. And because of it, we went from no label, 2 labels, like a plethora that we could have chosen from, and then to the 2 that I just described to you inside of the journey. And look, like musicians, I think any musician or entertainer out there, like you have to have a creative bone in your body to be able to do that in the first place. And the other side of that though is that like that can translate into any kind of work. We dumb that down too much. Like we put B2B or business in a box and we say, now you got to wear a tie, you got to shave, you got to do all these things. It's like, well, why? Like, I don't understand. Like, what is the purpose of that? And how do we ultimately break those stereotypes? Because they're negative stereotypes at this point. Like, what's associated with a tie and a business mindset and attitude? Like nothing good at this stage. It's more like you're going to have your money stolen by your sales manager or the owner of the company. You're going to have people manipulate you in the buying process and wait to the end of the quarter because they know you give out discounts and make you take less of a commission. Like these are the things that we associate with these words and these concepts. And for me, it's like, well, that's because we dehumanize the whole thing. And we've allowed for this kind of garbage to enter into that ecosystem. So this is our fault anyway. But how do we get away from that? And I personally think that allowing people to feel more human in the process is a huge piece of the puzzle, and creativity opens that door.
Mm. And I'm jealous because I can't grow a beard. I just shaved in preparation for Movember, but you got a beautiful beard over there. And by the way, I grew up in a Christian household, and I started to get into Linkin Park, who, recipes are incredible. And my mom says, "Oh no, you can't be listening to that." She took me to the Christian bookstore, and I discovered Skillet, who I love, and I go to their rock concerts. Red, Pillar. What was the name of your Christian rock band?
What we were called Imperial, but like we played Cornerstone and like guys like Skillet and Pillar were there, but their fans would have never come to see us play. We were like, when I say heavy metal, I mean like we were really heavy. So if anybody wants to look up Imperial, the album to check out would be We Sail at Dawn. And that would be like the latest that we ever released, and you can hear some of the stuff that I put out.
Perfect. And I'll definitely check that out after. And one thing I've noticed about you is excellence is embedded in who you are. It's just how you show up in everything you do. Where does that come from?
My father, 100%. Like my dad taught me that there are a couple things that ultimately will create fulfillment and happiness in your life. One of them is to detach from outcomes. And so at a very early age, I was learning this identity of being okay with, not like knowing everything or being everybody's favorite person or being the best at something, but also like not settling at the same time too. So secondly, to that detachment from outcomes is this idea that every single thing you do, it should be draped in excellence. And again, going back to that word, what does it mean? Like, dude, excellence is the epitome of like living your best and most fulfilled life. And if we think less about, like, when we think about like what a fulfilled or happy life looks like, when we think about like the micros of those things, more so than just the things that the world or the status quo would tell us is the standard, which would be this idea of money and a job. I need a job. I needed that to make money, and I could buy stuff and be happy, and everything's fine. And then I get fired, and then it's like, oh, okay, so I gotta go find a job again, and then I gotta get promotions and work my way up, and then maybe I'll be happy again, hopefully, and find fulfillment. And I get fired again. It's like, okay, and so let's do that again. And now, like, at this point, I'm completely desensitized and maybe even jaded to the whole process, and so I've stopped living with that purpose. So if I do less of like working on myself in a way that ties back to what other people desire of me, but instead to hold myself to a standard that's higher than that of the world's for my own self, and to seek those things and seek that glory on a daily basis, then I'll get what I deserve out of that, which is ultimately the happiness that I'm talking about. And it's not something that's manufactured. And then it can take a long time, right? Like, my dad owned a business for 29 years. And toward the end of his life, he after he sold his business in 2012, he people will say things like, do you regret selling your business and not like owning your business anymore? My dad be like, kind of, because even though I absolutely struggled, and at certain times in my life I thought, why am I doing this? And money is always an issue. My dad would say, I also realized like how much freedom I had and how much happiness I had. And really, like, those types of things that from the freedom and happiness perspective that I achieved, that my father achieved, no one could have done that for me. I could only do that for myself. And I those kind of lessons were always instilled in me, bro, growing up. And so really, my dad, the legacy of my father is that of a servant leader. The story is that when my father passed away in 2016, he died of cancer, that we came to the funeral, and I gave the eulogy, and I was down in the front row and just like focused, zoned in, like ready to honor my best friend, my mentor. And I went up on stage. It was the first time that I really like looked out in the crowd. And when I looked out in the crowd, I was like, wow, I did not expect to see thousands of people in this place. And like, on top of that, a bunch of faces that I don't even recognize. It was almost like a wedding crashers moment. I don't mean to be silly, but it really was, where I was like, these people are in the wrong place. This is too many people. This guy that owned a copier company, like, what's going on here? And for the next 6 hours after the eulogy, bro, I mean, I had literally like every single person come up to me and tell stories about my dad. And they'd say things, there was a few people that were like, I knew him from high school, I knew him from college, but the majority of people were like, your dad was my copier guy. And so I learned, not only did I learn these lessons, it was like the Big Fish movie, right? Where I'm like, I'm witnessing this man my whole life, like, do these things or talk about these lessons or tell me these stories. And I always believed him. So that's the difference between me and the movie. But when he died, man, we learned the best lesson, which is that, like, his life was extremely fulfilled, and he was absolutely one of the happiest guys that you ever knew, because he literally instilled that in other people and transfer that emotion with ease without even really trying. He just naturally was that person. So that's who I get it from.
Wow, what a blessing to have a father to model the way and show you what it looks like to actually build a legacy. And I saw a quote that I pulled up from one of your posts, and you said the greatest legacy one can pass on to one's children and grandchildren is not money or the material things accumulated in one's life, but rather a legacy of character and faith. And clearly, your father passed on that type of legacy. Is there anything else you would add on top of that quote to embody what your father taught you?
That's a great quote. I mean, I think that the big picture perspective for me is that to live a life that's worth leaving a legacy around and behind for other people to learn from should be everybody's ultimate goal. And that, in doing so, like, do you ever really die? Like, does a legend ever actually die? And again, it's not like this. It's not some kind of like sick thing in my head that's like, I'll never die, right? That's not the at all the concept here. The thought, though, is that, like, well, what am I going to leave for my son? What's he going to leave for his? And ultimately, like, if we can think beyond just the moments, right? Like, here I am, I'm sitting in my home, and I can't pay my bills, and I'm 4 months behind on my mortgage, and I'm thinking the bank's going to take my home, and this is 2008, and everything sucks, and I can't sell anything, and I'm stuck in that moment. And because I'm stuck in that moment, I can't think about happiness or fulfillment or a legacy or anything beyond that moment. And because of that, ultimately, I become substandard, and I don't fulfill the things that I've been called to this earth to fulfill in the first place. And I'm living a mediocre life in that moment. But if instead, when I'm in those places, I can say, bro, you were called for more than this. And that if you wallow in this, and you accept this as defeat, you will never find those things that have been promised to you that you need to go and earn. Yeah, and so ultimately it is about character, it's about integrity, it's about bravery and courage. It's about this concept of self-worth and discipline. It's about excellence. I freaking love that word. You'll hear me say it a million
Yeah.
times if you let me. And ultimately it's about building an outcome that when others look at it, that they can say, wow, this inspires me. Because, like, well, like, my father did that for me, and look at me and what's happening to me. And other people did that for my dad as well too. And if you look at most of the people out there generationally that, are successful, in most cases they're going to say things like, my dad inspired me, my mom inspired me, my sister inspired me, my aunt inspired me. Like, that's where it derives from. Like, you can have such a bigger impact than you even understand or know. Imagine all the people that are passed away that we quote: Winston Churchill, right? George Washington. I don't quote either of those people, by the way, but occasionally maybe
Yeah.
somebody does. It's one of them. But again, the thought process is like, those people left lasting impressions, regardless of whether or not they were perfect people. Like, nobody ever is going to be that. The main point being that they weren't Hitler, and
Yeah.
also, like, when they did die, there wasn't like a bunch of bones that were uncovered. Like, oh snap, didn't think about this. And so, like, operating your life in this very moral and integral way isn't just about like your reputation at the time. It's about how you'll instill and inspire that same drive, motivation, and passion into other people, which it turns into a movement, bro. That's the bottom line, is it turns into a movement. And in most cases in history, if we go back and study it, we see that men and women accomplish more through community. That
Mm.
men and women accomplish more through this identity of going outside of just themselves and what they think they can do. That's when things last the longest, when you really do the research. So I love the quote, and ultimately I think it's that people can't just read the quote and think, yeah, that's great. They got to dive in deeper in their mindset and say, like, well, what does that look like? How can I apply that? What's the playbook, right? Because, like, if we go back to earlier when we talked about value, like, great word, what does it mean? Somebody freaking tell me. If I ever read one more post that says, you got to fix problems, you got to provide value, and then, four other things that they bury in there, it's like, I'm stuck on the second one still, and I would really appreciate you telling me what that means, right? Instead of making people wonder what buzzword you're using to make yourself look better, create a reputation around
Mm.
your actions that it is that you're choosing to take, that instills that legacy into other people.
Yeah, you were showing us by doing in action what greatness looks like, what great values look like. You're laying out an operating system for an amazing life. And obviously, it was really shaped by your father. And that resonates with me because my dad, I'm fortunate that, blessed that he's still alive. But man, has he shown me so much, whether it's in sales and life and faith. And Desiree, who joined, said, Dale always preaching to souls. So good. Love it. So Dale, I wanted to get back to story time. Let's go back to some outside the box, strategies to get busy prospects' attention. There was a story that I saw. It was the donut story. Now, maybe you did this a bunch of times. So do you need any more context, or can you remember the donut story?
I know more donut stories than I could tell. How about I give you a donuts, like the origin of the donut story? And
Yeah.
it actually started with a pizza box, and there was a medical facility that I kept trying to get into, and I had this at the time when I was discovering contact marketing and making touch pieces for myself. We call them market tools inside of the Sales Rebellion. As I was like building this this quiver of different things that I could utilize in the field that would connect me deeper with humans. I really looked deeply into these concepts. And one of the first things I thought about is like gifting is nice, but also if I don't know you, it could feel like a bribe. If ultimately when I meet you, you go, yeah, hey, by the way, this is the product I sell, and can we talk about that? You know, like it seemed scummy to me at the time, and ultimately it is. But I tried to figure out a balance, right, in my early years, because I also wanted people to feel seen, feel heard, feel cherished. I didn't want people to just feel like a number, and so I had to find this balance. So, one of the things that is a topic for all salespeople is that your prospect will typically ignore you, and then like when your prospect becomes active in your sales in your pipeline, and you get a sales cycle started with them, that eventually they'll probably ignore you again. And even if it's like multiple times for just a little bit of time, they're gonna most likely ignore you a few times. And it's not even that you're being ignored; it's just that people are busy. And so as I sat back and I started to really like put these pieces of the puzzle together and think less about myself and more empathetically about others, I started to say, it's one thing to tell somebody, hey, I know you're busy. I wanted to meet with you, so here's a marketing piece. And another thing to say, hey, here's something that I got for you, but it's not here because I've been trying to get a hold of you and you've not been paying attention to me. And I know it's a little like ballsy, as they would say, or gutsy. But the thought is like, it's the truth. So like if I've been calling or emailing this person, they've seen my name, right? I know they have. Like, just like if I finally hear from a specific seller that's been calling me on the phone, but I've seen their emails a few times and they're like, hey, it's Charles. I'm like, have you been emailing me? Yeah. Hey, what's up? Yeah. Like that's reality. Like most salespeople try to, really try to achieve that reality. But ultimately, I think what most people don't understand is that like when they're doing things to reach out to folks behind the scenes, the stuff they're not seeing is that they know who you are. You're in their ecosystem. So if your email sucks, right? Like you talked a little bit about my subject lines. Like if your email sucks, then they're going to look at you that. They're going to be like, oh, but here's this robot. Now he's on the phone. What is he going to tell me my 3 pains that he fixes and ask me for a 15-minute calendar, slot? Like these are the stereotypical issues and the reason why people ignore you in the first place. So I probably stopped in about 4 or 5 times over the course of about 6 months, so about once a month. And I had sent, probably about the same amount of emails as well to who I was told, like, hey, this is the decision maker, set an appointment with her. So I walk in and I've got 6 boxes of pizza and I drop them on the front counter and I say, hey, this is for so-and-so. It's lunch for the whole office though. Please just let her know that I came by. All my information's up here on the top. Pizza. And so this lady's like, wow. And she's like, thank you. And I leave. And this is how I imagine it going, okay? Because I don't know exactly how it went. I just know that I got an appointment, right? And I came back, and they laughed at this. Spoiler alert: she picked the pizza up. Well, there's no pizza in the pizza boxes, so like she had to be thinking like, this pizza is like gluten-free, crustless, like just cheese and sauce. Like there's no weight to this thing, right? And so eventually someone opened the top and there's a note on the top of the box and it says, hey, I'm really sorry, I bought this pizza to come and serve to the team, but I haven't been able to get a hold of you. It was going stale, so I had to eat it.
Yeah,
my bad. It was real simple, right? Real simple messaging like that. And it blew their socks off. It blew their ass off their body. So they were down to meet with me after that. And then it was a whole scene when I first showed up, for the next appointment, like people coming to meet me. Oh, you're the copier warrior. It's nice to meet. Like it created a reputation for me in there because it was honest, blunt, raw, and real in that moment with people, which to me was the most basic ingredients to be able to be very good at interrupting typical patterns, but also relating to people in a very familiar and also relevant way, and not just being a gimmick.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that it's just real, and you're not trying too hard. You're almost. It's funny to say you're almost flirting with them, a little push pull. And the example that I read about, I mean, I don't know, that sounded pretty weird, but in a way, it's kind of what you're doing. And the example I read about, you posted on LinkedIn, and guys, make sure to follow Dale on LinkedIn. He's come out all the time with great stories that are engaging, real world examples, and a lot of value. And shameless plug that's not so shameless as I say, his podcast, his new book, and all his best resources are linked in the description of this video. I encourage you to check it out like I have. So this example, Dale, you were in the parking lot like at 4:30 a.m. or something, some ungodly hour that I'd still be sleeping. And you went in there with donuts, and the guy showed up. And when you said you had donuts, he said, "Come on back." And then you sat down with him. So you were there, I think, and he opened it, and there was nothing in there. And one of your notes saying like, "Hey," and he loved it. So that's interesting. It sounds like there were some times where the person was actually there and you were there with them. Did that happen?
Yes. Yeah.
Unreal.
It was unreal. It was unreal to experience it. Even it was like almost a cringe moment to an extent, like, oh yeah, what's this person gonna think or say? But again, like if we're diligent and we're in all things practicing excellence, we'll understand people a little bit better before we ever get in there. So I knew the dude was blue collar, and he had 3 kids. They were older. One of them was probably more my age even, and so in my head, just like doing a little research, understanding the vertical that he was in, and knowing that he's probably pretty down to earth guy, I just kind of thought to myself, this feels like a good bet, not necessarily a safe one. Nothing is ever safe. Risk is very important inside of your career. If you want to be the best, and ultimately you want to have outcomes that are worth your time, risk is important. But I'd say probably a dozen times when I did the empty boxes, the person was there and I decided to wait. For the most part, though, I was pretty good and diligent about like letting someone have the experience without me present, because I was that confident in it as well, too. That's what I would really encourage people to think about, is like, these stories are fun, right? And they're whimsical and they're silly. And I was absolutely out of my mind, and I still am. Like, matter of fact, I'll announce it right here. I've been thinking about putting a series of posts up that say, I want to cold call the hardest to reach person in the world who isn't, and getting people to start like putting in inquiries like this person, like, and really truly finding like the person that is in Russia on like an oil rig out in the ocean in the Antarctic, like, that I have to get a cold call into. Like, that's what I'm kind of looking to do right now, right? But I digress. The idea is that it's more than just this idea of being radical and audacious. It's this concept of like giving people what they deserve. So here you have a guy that he gets called on a lot, and for the most part, people do things like send empty promises. I know I can provide you value. There's that word again. I know I can fix this problem for you. And he's not even having a problem. I know that if our company's partner, that I'd be a great vendor for you. And this is the type of sales messaging that I lived in at the time. And dude, you know what's crazy? It's still out there. Like crazy, it's out there too. It's not that it's like let up by any means. There are certain communities that are like, well, that's nuts because we don't do it at our company. Well, get out of your little bubble and go and see the world, because for the most part, 80-90% of salespeople suck at reaching out. They do. And so really the idea is, how do I give this person the experience they deserve? And he deserved that kind of experience. He deserved somebody saying to him, hey man, you've been ignoring me. I respect that. But also, I'm going to make you feel a little awkward right now in the process and make you think a little deeper about this relationship in the process. And hopefully, and if you don't, that's fine, right? But hopefully, I'm gonna earn credibility and trust in this moment, because you're gonna realize I'm somebody that if I make a mistake, I'll own it, because I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid of like what you're think of this empty donut box. And that's not like, I'll caution everybody that's listening to that. That's not a play. That's a genuine mindset and attribute. This idea of being fearless in these moments. It's not a play. It's not a tactic. It's not a tool or a trick. It is a raw emotion that if you can tap into for yourself and believe and be on a daily basis, you will infuse that into other people. And most individuals out there would prefer to be around a person that's fearless, to be quite frank, in less of a toxic way, right? But in more of an altruistic hero type approach. So I strive to be that for people when it comes to the problems that they're facing that they don't know how to fix. And the number one thing that I'm really good at is creativity. And that goes hand in hand with prospecting. So I focus very diligently on those things. And as the copier warrior, when I was selling a product, the most commoditized of the freaking world, I'll fight anybody that thinks they have a more commoditized product than a copy machine.
Yeah.
I did the same thing, right? I never sold that copier. I sold the biggest problem that they run into, the stereotypes that they have to deal with, the crappy sales experiences, the bad service, the gold standard of what they had to essentially live in inside of our industries. I beat those things for them, and I was fearless in my efforts to get them to those places, that top of that mountain.
Yeah, what I've noticed in cloud sales, which is somewhat commoditized, I used to sell at Google Cloud, and AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud, they're all great offerings, and there's really very small amounts of differentiation. It's not as commoditized as your space, I would tell you that. But what I found is that I believe people really invest in relationships and partnerships more than technology. And it's just my observation that you offered a truly differentiated relationship and experience in working with you. How do you feel about that thought that people are really investing in relationships and a sales experience at the end of the day?
Well, I think it's very unpopular because that's not scalable, Chris. So stop talking about that. I think that it's also very unpopular because it's not easy to teach. And a lot of people don't think you can teach it, as a matter of fact, but it's just a principle. The principle is that people would much rather be around a group of people that they like, that they trust, and that they feel warm and welcome with, and that they don't feel like they're being used for or in any particular way with those people. So if we just think about these basic human behaviors and we apply them to business, then it's very easy for me to say, like, what you're saying is the way. And that the reason that we don't do it, again, is because, like, it's hard. Most people have been burned. Most people can't trust, and think about personal relationships and not just business relationships. Like, how many personal relationships do you have where you've been burned? I can count them on two hands, right, for myself. And I've known thousands of people at this point in my life. So I feel like that's a pretty good number in relation, but that's the point. It's like, there's always going to be a finger that comes up when you ask that question. And there's nobody out there that's not like felt burned or intentionally been burned or, just jaded by people to some capacity, whether it's a auto accident where the guy hits you and he goes, "Hey, pull over," and they drives off full speed. There's all kinds of different ways to describe the trauma that is attached to distrust in the first place, and lots of different scenarios. Sometimes it can be minuscule things. It can be somebody just like deceiving you in a very, let's just say, whimsical or relatively small way that doesn't necessarily, it's not detrimental to you, but it's enough to where it's like, wow, they lied to me. That sucks. And that can affect people. So here we are out here pretending that somehow, like, people just buy your brand name and your product. Okay, but keep thinking that way, because I'll tell you that, like, that's how I beat everybody in my industry. Is that I was up against manufacturers that had hundreds of years of existence and that had hundreds of millions and billions of dollars in net worth, and they're in touting like, we're the biggest, we're the best, we have all these amazing things, and I'm winning all their sales, their $1 million sales, their $5,000 sales, all of them, because I'm not constraining myself to some stupid rhetoric that goes around telling people, like, I'm really good at what I do. Instead, I'm building a reputation. I'm meeting people where they are. I'm earning that trust, and ultimately I'm building something that lasts out longer and way deeper. It goes way deeper than just being the account executive for this organization.
Yeah, you hit on a key thing too, is that prospects don't care at all about how great you are, because they just care about themselves and their problems, that what's in it for them. And a lot of people fall into that trap. But having worked at Google Cloud and been a part of a culture that is quote unquote googly, I can say you are very googly. You really embody those qualities through your authenticity and creativity. And that's something that a company like Google really celebrates. And I remember I got a meeting with the CMO of Sir Latab, and it it wasn't as outside the box as some of your amazing strategies, but I mentioned a story where my mom bought me a macaroon making class. I didn't want to go. I went, and next thing you know, I'm on the T in Boston sharing macaroons with strangers, having a great time. And that was my own mild example of kind of being creative in Dale-esque. Now, I wanted to hit on one other example. Time is flying by, and I have so many questions I want to ask you to extract as much value as possible for this audience. So one more example, and then we have some other questions. But there was a time that you went into the office of some prospect and you gave a wristband to the admin that really flattered her, she loved. And then you gave a trophy to the CTO, or actually, I don't know if it was a CTO. It wasn't a CTO probably, but an executive that was hard to get a hold of. Do you remember that one? I know you have so many stories, but it was from a LinkedIn post.
Yeah, that was like, so one thing I'll say is that like the wristbands, the armbands, I carried those with me to every account. So whether it was a major account or it was a small one doctor family practice, or it was a financial advisor that was also the broker, and and like I used these with anybody and everybody that I knew was like dealing with people on a daily basis and had the function of reception. Because I feel like a couple things. Number one, we call them gatekeepers, and that's disgusting. And ultimately, we look at them as this thing that's like a block to get to the. There's people out there in the sales training world that literally teach people to just like just ignore them, go around them. Who cares about them? It's one of the most ignorant things that I've ever heard, and it sucks too because it's so prevalent. It's like I get messages from reps all the time. They're like, "Check this out," showing me slides of all these ridiculous teachings, and so for me, like. I think that everybody's important. And the more that, again, that we have this mindset of that people matter more than anything else, then the more that we change our outcomes for ourselves, because alliances are very important. The problem with most sellers is they build transactions with a decision maker. But what I was doing is I had 30 people in a 200 employee office that knew who I was. And not just that, like I wasn't doing that out of strategy. Like I was doing that out of like pure, like, I want to build a community. Like, I'm willing to put in the work and the effort. And so those wristbands were something that I used quite often and put a lot of smiles on faces. And I would put a QR code hidden on the inside of them. But at certain points in doing that, remember, we're talking 2012, 2011. It was really difficult back then to get anybody to scan a QR code. Even though I used them, I wasn't a really big fan of them in those early stages. I just like to humanize me. I kind of just abandoned them in 2014 or 15 for the most part and used URL links instead because I felt like somebody would go to copywarrior.com just out of pure curiosity, then to download this app to scan a QR code from their phone. But now that it's built into the phone, it's almost dumb not to scan a QR code. It's like, as long as you make it curious enough, right? So I dropped this wristband off. I think that was one of the most curious things that caused the person to think like, well, this is pretty innovative. And then ultimately, I got good information out of him, which was, when you build that relationship and you earn that trust, you put in the work and the effort of the time. It's not like I got all this stuff right away. When I tell a story, it might look like it was all the same day, but it's because I had 1,300. Well, I guess we have 2,000 characters, 3,000 characters, or whatever it is now. But I try to stick to 1,300 because I'm old school LinkedIn. Yeah, I've been on it since 2017. So in my mind, I thought I'll play the long game here. That's totally cool. And then trying to get with the CTIO was his title at the time, at least. I think he's the CTO now, or the CIO now. I knew that I wasn't going to meet with him because people were feeding me that information. Like, dude, this guy, he barely meets with his own team. He has internal meetings and he shows up on his cell phone calling the office, and he stays for 5 minutes and is like, all right, y'all got to finish up because he's so busy. So I bought him a trophy and it said, first place, hardest CTIO to get on the phone or get a meeting with. And I sent it to his office in this like super dope box that I doctored up and put all this packaging stuff. And it was awesome. It was that was probably one of my favorite ones. And this guy called me on my cell phone like right away. I mean, literally I was in the parking lot leaving, which, probably took me 20 minutes to get to because of the size of this facility, right? But he literally called me on my cell phone while I was driving and was like, man, I just laughed so hard out here in my office. I'm this is Mark, by the way. And he's like, going into it. It was great. And then I met with him shortly after and and got a PO from his purchasing person, who was like one of the first people that I got connected with inside the account. Like, the other side of this that sellers need to hear is like, just because you have a point of contact doesn't mean that there's not other people connected to that person that can ultimately help you
Yep.
in your progress of building that relationship with that human. And they're happy to do that in most cases too. It doesn't mean that everybody is, right? But ultimately, if you're inquisitive enough, if you lead with a curious mind, just as you're trying to extract curiosity from people, it'll pay dividends for you. And if you put in the effort and the hard work, like, it's not hard to go and make trophies. I had a whole bunch of those made. It usually when I did one thing, I did like 50 of them. So
Yeah.
when I did
Smart.
cardboard cutouts of myself, 6-foot cardboard cutouts of myself, I did 20 of them. And I found 20 people that I could drop off this cardboard cutout of me stabbing a copy machine in the middle of the woods and maybe get an appointment. So it really is about the risk. Ultimately, it's about the ability to be patient and then be different. And not just to be different, it's like, be uniquely different. Give people that relevant, familiar emotion and provide them with a little glimpse of like who you are in the process.
Yeah, I'm in the managed services space now. So I went from Google to a consulting partner. There are so many of us. It's like crazy. And how do you differentiate? So what you're dropping is gold. And I've been thinking myself, I'm based in Austin, Texas, of getting trophies. So I'll let you know how it goes to bring to some of the unicorn startups and enterprises I'm chasing. So guys, let's try out these tactics. They're pretty amazing. And TJ Mosser, if I'm saying his name right, he said, really digging this pod, boys. Just jumped into tech sales almost a year ago, also from a local metal band that nobody cared about. Thanks for keeping me inspired. So, Dale, I really appreciate the inspiration. Now, I wanted to ask you how Star Wars novels has helped fuel your business growth.
I believe that we do not let go enough of the process of learning in a way that allows us to think outside the box in the first place. So like, when I think about learning and getting better and growing things like my business, I'm not like, hey, let me go buy, whatever, insert guru's name here. I'm not going to say it because somebody's going to get offended and scream, and I'm tired of dealing with that in my DMs. But y'all know who they are. Y'all know who follow me. Y'all know who I'm not like down with. So like, just insert their name in your head real quick. But the thought is like, sure, I can learn from those people. Like, I can learn stuff from those people without a doubt. Just like we can all learn from you. I learn from my prospects. I learn from my students. I learn from the squadron groups that we run, 6, 7 people at a time. I learn from all these people and like watching the way that they're doing things and how they're applying our teachings. And I learn from everybody, bro. But like, where I really derive my learning from 100% is getting myself into this very creative mode. And so if I'm like in fantasy world, and Star Wars is one of my favorite places to go and visit when it comes to fantasy world, I don't just latch to like the storytelling aspect and like all the different characters and just the wild imaginative world that's been created there. The way that some of these writers articulate the stories and the way that they incite and instill emotions in me as I'm going through these things are very helpful in regards to understanding if I build my website and I have a particular thing I want people to do on it. Am I putting myself in a business box and like limiting something like that, limiting a funnel process because it's business? Or am I doing it in a way that like makes people feel the same way I do when I do something I love that's creative and in this fantasy space? Because look, like whether you believe in God or not, I 100% do not think that God creates man and goes in the whole process and goes, you know what, we're gonna at a certain point we're gonna have people work a job Monday through Friday from 8 to 5. It's going to be part of like their genetics and in their DNA. Like, that's not a thing. Like, we weren't created to work. We were created to live. We were created to find fulfillment and happiness. We weren't created to become slaves to other people or processes or the world or the status quo at that. And so the more that we can really understand that ultimately, like, what we're doing in the business world is a literal construct. And that if we get back to the humanization of things and doing things like reading a fantasy book to get better at business. Like, I'm not saying that I think that a good negotiation tactic would be like using Jedi mind tricks and like lightsaber in somebody's face, but like, they're pretty good ideas, so you never know, like that could work. But I am saying that again, like if I can just open my mind a little bit differently and understand like how the brain ultimately works, how I drive and motivate myself, and what allows me to have these good ideas in the first place that think outside the box, that drive creativity, and that attract other people, that I'm winning. So that's how I use Star Wars to make my business better.
Love it. And something you might appreciate is my 9 to 5 job. Our company's called Bespin. We're named after a planet in Star Wars from The Empire Strikes Back, referred to as Cloud City. That's something I always nerd out with IT executives about. So I wanted to ask you, why is sales the greatest profession in the world?
Because salespeople can change lives. Not only like the lives of our prospects, but we can change our own lives as well too. Sales provides ultimate freedom. I don't have to be shackled to an 8 to 5 or 9. Like even if I am in sales and I work a 9 to 5, my boss used to say to me all the time, "Why do you travel so much? Like, why aren't you just like working extremely hard and long hours and making a ton of money and then just like retiring at 50?" And I just always laughed at that. Like, isn't that everybody's plan? Whoever gets there, like a very small majority. I'm going to live life now. I'm going to be 27 without a hip problem or a bad ankle, and I'm going to travel the world. And that's what I did, bro, is that I committed to excellence, good stewardship, this concept of choosing legendary, building a legacy, being a servant leader. And in doing that, I had better outcomes. And in those better outcomes, I changed my life. I changed my life. And then I allowed that to also drive and motivate me to change other people's. So I use things like my money and my monetary value to literally just angel, gift somebody that lost their husband or had a child in the hospital and was dealing with some, ridiculous things in their life, or was suffering from abuse from a spouse. Like I allowed myself to get like deeply ingrained into my communities and ultimately to change the lives of people. And on top of that, bro, there's plenty of times where we've made sales and we've done something for somebody that changes their life. There's some, like really cool person, I say that sarcastically, out there that loves to comment on my stuff when I talk about this, and he says things like, "You're not changing lives, you sell HBO subscriptions." He's really cool. And I always respond to him and I go, "Hey, check this out. Here, I'm going to watch this." So you sell an HBO subscription, and there's a documentary on HBO that this person would have never watched if they didn't have HBO. And they watch this documentary and they become like fired up and excited about their life. And they go and they change the way that they think about things and pursue something greater. You are changing lives, and you're, excuse my French, a dumbass for pretending that it's any other way. Period. And so for me, it's like I don't really care what people think about this side of it. Like I know I've watched it. I sat for 6 hours at my dad's end of life celebration and listened to people tell me about how my dad let them sleep on the couch and drove them to work because of a DUI and a divorce. I listened to people talk about how my father literally drove 50 minutes just to get onto a parking garage that was 3 stories to walk somebody off a ledge and killing themselves. I had people tell me things that like, "Your dad gave me $1,000 to just like help me."
Wow.
Yeah, like I listen to some of the craziest stories, and so I know that sales changes people's lives, and you can't tell me any different.
Amen. Preach it. Holy cow. So you can sell like everyone else, or you could sell like a rebel. What is the rebel way?
A rebel believes in hope, and not as like some whimsical thing, either like the verb of hope, which is that like if you have hope in something, you're taking action to achieve it, you are literally testing the limits and the boundaries of who you are as a person, and ultimately pushing the limits and the boundaries of the way that the world or the status quo sees something. So when people say you got to make 1,000 calls a day to be able to hit your quota at the end of a month, these are the moments when that rebel should kick in, and you should say, "That's insane. There's a better way." Because rebels believe in connection, impact people. Rebels believe in the identity of that. Our product is really like secondary, or even like third or fourth or fifth down the list in regards to what it is that people actually desire from us. A rebel is somebody that looks at a commission check and doesn't think, "That's my prospect," right? Instead, they think of it as like the aftermath, essentially, or the byproduct of good works and servant leadership. A rebel looks at community and says, "This is what I want to build." A rebel sees their own self-worth and their own life and says, I love you. And I want to be better as me. And I want to use that betterment, not to take advantage of people or to manipulate and get somewhere in life, but to build something that's truly authentic and provides happiness for myself. A rebel thinks so much differently than a traditional sales rep because of these things. We operate out of a creative space. We believe that attention is the exchange and that time is the currency of everything we do in sales. And by understanding these things, we act differently with excellence, good stewardship, and ultimately we change the game for every single person that we interact with and encounter because we're giving everything that we've got at 110%.
I mean, you just gave me a vision for sales that will get me up in the morning and a vision for how I'd live my life. So thank you for that. And thank you on behalf of the folks that are watching this and the folks that follow you for that, just painting that vision and modeling the way. So for folks who want to get into tech sales, for example, because this channel is about selling more, living more. I'm in tech sales, though. It's still in my 9 to 5, and it's been the focus. But you could be a copier salesman and absolutely crush it. But I guess, maybe I want to talk about breaking into sales with no experience. So it could be copier sales, it could be tech sales. Some folks are worried that I don't have a college degree. But my understanding is that you dropped out of college. I don't know if that's true. Correct me if I'm wrong. But if anything, what is your encouragement to folks who don't have a fancy college degree on how they can still take advantage of an amazing career in sales?
Yeah, I didn't go to college at all. I had scholarships to do so, both academic and sports related, mostly sports related. I was homeschooled, so I was raised non-traditionally in general, and I watched my father as an entrepreneur just like do whatever he wanted ultimately, and I thought to myself like, I want to do that too. My dad wasn't a college dropout necessarily; he was injured in football, and that caused him to have to kind of like replan and recommit, to what it was that ultimately he was trying to achieve and attain. So like my dad's whole life is based off of like, somebody basically saying like, you can't play sports anymore. And he woke up the next day and was like, cool. And completely went on a different path. And so like, I see the identity of a salesperson as like the ultimate rebel as well, too, just in the sense of the word, because we're people that don't conform to the standard because it's substandard in our opinion, because we want more for our lives. We want freedom and ultimate freedom, bro. That means time, not just money, right? That means the ability to have self-worth in the first place. Like those things are hard to achieve without ultimately being able to like work on yourself and to be able to do things like be on a live stream at the end of the day, like with your son eating a peanut butter jelly sandwich and hanging out. Like can't just do these types of things unless you have constructed a life of ultimate freedom around what it is that you're doing. And salespeople can do this. You don't just have to own a company like I do. You can do this in sales. But so the other thing around that I would say is that, and I don't mean to hate on college or higher education, but guys, it's a joke at this stage. Now, I'm not, again, like if you went somewhere and you got, go Knights, go Gators, whatever it is that your team is, right? Like good for you. I'm proud of you. But at the same time, like there's a whole generation of people that are getting stuck in this identity crisis of like, well, I'm going to be a nurse. And then all of a sudden they got a political science degree. And this is the problem with school is that it's a construct. It tells us like you have to be this thing. Like we are free spirited animals. That's what humans are. Like having somebody tell you anything is never going to get you as far as you want to go to begin with. So, so really thinking non-traditional in general about what it is that you do. What people hire. They hire for people that want to develop grit in their life, that have determination, that are willing to sacrifice risk and do things that seem hard because nobody else wants to do that. And there's no college degree that teaches those things. And so going out and proving it is what people care about more than anything else. And I would also say this, that tech sales is great. And don't get me wrong. I would encourage people to be looking at the non-traditional routes, the blue collar jobs, the construction materials salesperson, the LED lighting, salesperson. These people make several $100,000s a year, by choosing to rebel and to choose legendary as well too in the way that they sell and how they serve. And so you can have the same glitz and glamour without the sexiness when it comes to achieving the ultimate freedom that you desire in sales with big commission check. Look, we're all in sales. The reason we're in sales is to absolutely make money. Okay. The thing is that when I say that, I mean it differently than most people, because I'm talking about making money with purpose attached to it. And ultimately, not just looking at it as like, oh, I can make $1 million selling copy machines like Dale. Right. But instead saying like, what do I want to make and why? What's the purpose of these things? And by tying that into what it is that you do, like you can work anywhere you want that has a glass ceiling and the role of sales where you get to control the outbound, the inbound, everything, right? Like, or just simply the outbound as an example. But don't tie yourself into one vertical. Don't think that you have to go work for some investment company that's got their name on every building downtown because that's the only thing that can give you a good reputation. You could sell vacuum cleaners and build a bigger reputation than anyone else in the world if you choose to do those things and you believe in yourself.
I love that you gave us a paradigm shift, at least on this channel, because we do talk about tech sales a lot. It's sexy, it's the thing, it seems, lucrative, dynamic, but you can make like $1 million, approach that with like Dale has selling copiers. And at the end of the day, it's really sales that is the teacher and the vehicle to freedom and impact, regardless of what industry you're at. And you showed us that it actually might be even better to consider a different industry and be a rebel and not what everyone else is doing in tech sales. So I love that. And by the way, shoot, we're coming up on time, Dale. So I want to, like I would with a busy executive, check in. Do you have an extra 5 minutes? I'll watch the clock. If not, it's okay. We can wrap it up.
I can take 5. It's all good.
Okay, I'll try and let's do a rapid fire because okay, let's just do it. How do you think practically about picking a company? Like I think I read an article think about like hitting quota. So just to give you some context, but how do you think about picking a good company to work at?
Use RepView and see what other reps are saying about it. Find organizations not just that pay you good money, but also that ultimately that like it's proven internally at that organization that the product is desired and needed in the marketplace, and that the people that are there are happy with the culture and they're happy with the pay and comp plans, and that they're actually achieving the quota, especially if there's a limitation to your payouts because the quota. RepView is the greatest organization in my opinion to be able to go and get that accountability.
So what you're saying is don't leave your success like completely up to chance. Like look at a company where you can see based on the data, folks are actually hitting their numbers.
For sure. And listen, if you don't have that data, use those questions. Like when people say things like, what's the comp plan? Stop asking that question. Say, how many reps in here are achieving quota? And when the person looks at you and they're like, I think like 70 or 80%. It's like, no, it's probably 30 based on the like that's what you'll find when you ask these non-traditional questions in the first place. So just distinctly think, if you can't find them on something like RepView, what it is that you need to be asking that's going to help you to understand like whether or not there's favor in you working there in regards to whether or not the product is viable, the company has the capacity to be able to help provide that success as well too from a foundational standpoint, and that other people inside of the organization are actually achieving those numbers that they promise you.
Okay, so some rapid fire now on prospecting, some tactical tidbits here. Cold calling, everyone talks about it. You see on YouTube that cold calling this and that. How do you start the first 15 seconds of a cold call? That's a classic one.
We at the Rebellion, we started like this. Hey, Chris, this is Dale. Did you get my crumpled letter?
Yeah, I think I did. This is, oh shoot, where's the camera?
That was good. You had one waiting. But like what we think about is 3 things. How do we cause curiosity? How do we create emotional context? And how do we ultimately disrupt the typical pattern, and not in a way that's gimmicky is the thought process. So if I have a purpose for my call, that would be my purpose. That's why we do things like send trophies. Hey, what's up, Chris? It's Dale. I sent you that trophy. Right. This is the identity of the way that we start those calls. But if I'm calling cold, I think one of my favorites is, yo, Chris, good news and bad news. Bad news. This is a sales call. But before you hang up, the good news is that I'm not calling about a timeshare or your car's extended warranty. If you're feeling like throwing the dice, would you care to continue this conversation?
Oh, I love it. So basically you make it warm by having the crumpled letter in advance. So they already have an idea of who you are. You pique curiosity and you throw in a little humor. Like, do you want to roll the dice? I love that. And it's funny you mentioned timeshare because my dad sold timeshare and somehow he pulled it off and did well. It was #1 in the country. So it's freaking hilarious. Okay, shoot. We have like 1 minute or 2. So in terms of the objection, I'm not interested. You had a post and it made me think that there's a root problem. Like maybe you're not being interesting. So how do you think about that objection? I'm not interested. Is there a way to just be more interesting in the first place?
Well, yeah, for sure. Like the majority of rebels will tell you that they hear when they don't hear that objection, what they hear is like, "Hey, man, we got a great relationship with somebody already," or "Hey, man, we got 2 years left in the contract," or "Hey, friend, we, like, thanks for reaching out, thanks for the crumpled letter. I really enjoyed it, but we're not a good fit." Right? That's what we're trying to achieve at the forefront of what we're doing from a call in or cold calling perspective. But at the same time, I love it when somebody says not interested because all we got to do is think about the principles that we talked about in this whole episode, which is like, why is that? How do we speak to that familiar moment, or do we provide context that we get it? And so, like, one of my favorites back in the day to say was like, it sounds like you get a lot of cold calls. Sounds like you have a lot of people pitching you. Sounds like you've heard, can I get 15 minutes on your calendar one too many times? And if I can again like speak to this relevant, very familiar moment for this person, they look at it as credibility. That like I know what I'm talking about. I know what they have to deal with and go through. So the objection ultimately can be, from my perspective, it can be avoided altogether, and you can get a better description of like why they're not interested without hearing we're not interested if you give them a better experience before you ever call. But if you get it when you call, I love the identity of essentially like using again like something very relevant, very stereotypical that they deal with on a daily basis when it comes to like the activity that they're in with you and speaking to that and bluntly calling it out.
Okay, final question. Hit my quota, cutting myself off. It's a great one to end on. You were sitting in your car and you had a $20,000 commission check and you made more in one day than you had over the course of years. And it took you a while to get there. What are your final advice on a couple tips on what it takes for folks out there to get there to have that type of experience?
Yeah, I when I think back to that moment, I think the best way to really like help people understand that moment for me and maybe like feel a familiarity to that moment if you've had this kind of experience yourself, or say to yourself, yeah, that's what I want, is to start with this idea that like I had 3 jobs at that point. I was a bartender, a bar back, at 2 separate places, and then I sold copy machines, and I was barely getting by, and I worked 70 to 90 hours a week because of all these jobs, and I was really just like scraping, and I woke up one day and said like, man, I'm gonna go all in on this copier thing. Like if I can't hit my bills or whatever, then God bless, and we'll see what happens. And I took the risks, and in my mind though, I knew that I could make that kind of money. I believed in myself, and I had seen like the evidence and where it was available as well too. That I could write a $250,000 sale and I could make anywhere between 50 and $100,000 based on the kind of profit margin inside of that sale. So getting to that point, took a lot of time, grit, energy, and effort, and ultimately belief in myself and what I could do in the first place. But it also took 4 years. 4 years. I
Hmm.
went from making $27,000 a year for like the first 2 years to making like 35 or 40 in the third year, digging our company out of this recession and all these issues that were happening financially with us. And then year 4, my dad sold the organization. I was bought up with them, and we merged with another company. Basically, we got to keep everything we had, kind of deal, status quo, but like we were given a lot more. We were given no debt. We were given the ability to just like not have to worry about like if we made commission or not, because we had to make payroll. It was like freeing in that moment. And dude, that was when it happened. It was 90 days into this acquisition, and I wrote the same type of deal I normally would write, honestly, at this point in time. But for the first time, we weren't struggling as an organization, and I told my wife, I was like, check the bank account tomorrow in the morning, when you wake up. And man, she was literally checking it at the same time I was like very curious as to what was going on. And man, I get goosebumps just thinking about like being in that car and seeing that number and just like
Hmm.
awakening in that moment and being like, yo, I can work really hard and very diligently and I can achieve this. And it just changed my whole life. And from there on out, I mean, I never made less, dude. And like, and that's
Wow.
not to brag or say that I'm better than everybody else or anything like that. That was when you are given the proof of your hard work and the reward that comes with that in sales. There is something that changes in you, and either you tap into that change and you achieve a ridiculously awesome outcome that lasts for lots of years. I spent 13 years selling copiers before I started this business. right? Or you just allow it to be like a moment that fizzles out. And I chose to do that. So it's not so much about getting to that moment, it's about as much as it's about when you get that, what's next? What will you choose?
Thank you for showing us what's possible, what it takes to build a sales legacy. Guys, we got some homework. Check out Dale on LinkedIn. Check out his book, How to Start a Sales Rebellion. It's linked in the description of this video. His podcast. Dale, what other resources, maybe you have a community, what other resources can they get plugged in with?
Yeah, we got a Slack community. It's a free community if people want to. You can go to crumpledletter.com and buy the crumpled letter that we just talked about and start prospecting like a rebel. We got sales training and coaching, as most firms that are in our space do. We've got non-traditional stuff like doing the actual fulfillment. So, if you're somebody that wants to send these things and doesn't want to do it yourself, like we do it for you. And the fulfillment side of what we do is pretty epic on top of it. So, because if you can imagine like the idea of like having somebody doing your prospecting without it just being like banging the phone all day, but instead like creating experiences and leaving a lasting impact and legacy for people, it's going to elevate your sales game no matter what. And that's what we're here for. We're here to help to support that concept of choosing to be legends inside of what it is that we do. And little guy's trying to make his appearance before we go.
Bella's trying to come in too.
Yeah. So find me on LinkedIn, linkedin.com/IM/copy warrior if you got questions about any of this stuff. And if not, just like Google the Sales Rebellion and Dale Dupree and go find all our resources, find our Slack, find our crumpled letter, have some fun.
Dale, you went above and beyond, man. You were so generous for your time. We went way over, but thank you, guys, to your success in tech sales, in sales, copier sales, any type of sales and life. Happy selling and happy living. And we'll see you in the next one. Thank you, Dale.
Yeah, man. Talk soon.
Cheers, y'all.